The famous 40K saying is, "And they shall know no fear," right? But I'm like, they have to.
Oh my God, that was super nerdy. Go ahead.
What it is?
It's the brand. It's the brand.
And it's the title of the episode. Like, and if we're not super nerdy, then I want to meet those people.
We shouldn't be doing the show.
Hi, this is Sam Stone with Den of Geek here at New York Comic Con 2024 with the creative team behind Secret Level, starting on Prime Video on December 10th. Dave, Tim, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Our pleasure.
Yes, it is.
So you guys have plenty of experience with the anthology format through Love, Death, and Robots. How is it taking that to the video game world and different games with every week, with every episode with Secret Level?
The anthology format goes back even further than I would say than Love, Death, and Robots. If you know anything about Blur, which is our studio that's been around for almost 30 years at this point, our bread and butter has always been these 3-5-minute trailers for a plethora of video games over the years. So like the anthology format really started there, like short form storytelling. I've only done one of Love, Death, and Robots episodes. It was Sunny's Edge in Volume 1. And I remember when Tim was like, "You've got 15 minutes." It felt like I had a whole movie's worth of runtime compared to the sort of 3 or 5 minutes we used to get, although we never really stuck to that. We would be given 3 minutes, and then I remember we did some stuff for Elder Scrolls 2, and that expanded up to like 6-7 minutes, and it was always a battle to maintain it.
60 minutes for Halo. The redo of the Halo. So we get up there.
But that's it's very much a part of Blur's DNA, is the sort of short form storytelling of it. So it's a little trickier in that on Secret Level there's so much lore to pull from, whether it's D&D or Warhammer. There's 40-50 years of that. So I think it's the trick there is figuring out what's important, what fans want to see, and then trying to fit that into what we have to work with.
I would add, just on the anthology of it all, it used to be when we first did Love, Death, and Robots, which grew out of heavy metal, the idea that every story was going to be different was largely seen as a drawback, even though as a creative person I'm like, oh fuck, you mean I get to do, can I say fuck? I can say, okay good.
Can you talk without saying?
Yeah, it would cut half of my vocabulary. Sorry, where was I? No, the idea that every story would be a new thing, and every story would be a new creative reset of the clock was just super fucking exciting, because doing a movie or a larger project, sometimes, even as much as you love it, it's a 2-year project, or it's 18 months or even longer. And this is an opportunity to change it up creatively every few months. They take longer than that, but
well, you've got quite the murderer's row for this first season. I mean, you've got Megaman, but you've also got more recent things like New World Eternum. You've got, you've got the Outer World, everything, D&D, like you were saying, Warhammer 40K. Like, how was it? I mean, working with all these different game developers and publishers, and kind of like, getting the licensing just down for this season and making sure all those properties were beautifully well represented.
The licensing of it is not easy. I will say, though, it's like that is what made it easier, but it wasn't easy, is that because we've been doing this so long with Blur, there is a sort of inherent trust that we're not going to sort of trample all over their IP. I think with anything we do, our goal is we're standing on the shoulders of these franchises that have been around for decades, and all we want to do is leave them in a better state than we found them, right? So we're just borrowing them for this sort of little moment in time. But that trust was sort of paramount. There's a lot of the way the show is structured and how it was built. Tim can talk to that, but it was not an easy process at all. Why we picked who we picked, it's complicated, and it's also because of the structure of the show. There's a sort of mutual benefit for everyone. It's it was structured in a way where not everyone we have 15, 10, and 5-minute episodes, but we wanted it to represent indies and nostalgia titles, not just AAA sort of franchises out there. But yes, as to the process.
And we always knew it would be a mix of new games, current blockbusters, and like Dave said, we wanted to do nostalgia and indie games because we wanted to represent the whole community. If I had my way, we'd have board games in the show, but I don't see any reason why it has to be restricted to just, it's really like, what does the community enjoy in terms of game playing? Video games is great, but all of gaming is valuable, and it's sort of the community that plays video games also does these other things. And then I'll just say, it took Amazon having the vision to say, look, we don't need to do a land grab to make a show like this, because everybody knows, or maybe you don't, that Hollywood is a very acquisitive place, and so they want to own and control everything if they're going to invest money in it. And Amazon said, look, we understand these are huge games, and they exist in their own right, and we're just borrowing them for a while, and they made the deal making easy, which could have been a nightmare. And it was only a bad dream. I mean, anytime you get lawyers and contracts is sometimes tricky. But Amazon, their willingness to say, "Look, we're just going to play in your sandbox for a while," made it really possible.
One property in one of the episodes that I saw that goes both video games and tabletop is Warhammer 40K, and telling the story of like Space Marines in less than 20 minutes, highlighting how badass and unstoppable they can be in the field of battle. While, some of the action sequences there are some of the best actions and sequences that I've seen you do. I've seen you do like the Arkham trailers, and so, that's really, there's a high pedigree there. How is it telling a story of Space Marines within just that, that 20-minute, even if it feels like a movie compared to a 5-minute spot, how is it doing that in less than 20 minutes?
Dave directed the Warhammer spot, just by the way, and Blair did the CG. So
yeah. And it goes, first of all, it's not easy, and I'm gonna go off on a tangent here because I love Warhammer a lot. 20 years ago to the year, it was 2004. I'm sitting at my desk, and Tim comes over to me, and he's like, "Man, I think it was Relic at the time that we were doing. The Dawn of War was a RTS Warhammer game, and they were like, they wanted the trailer, but they only have 4 weeks. So I told them we can't do it. And I was like, pick the phone back up and fucking tell them we can make it. Typically back then, it would take 4 months to make a trailer. Like now it's closer to sometimes 8 months. So we'd never done anything like that. And I took a lot of shit for saying we could do it. But like it was this amazing moment in time where like the sort of Navy SEALs of our studio came together. We pulled the best from every other, we do multiple shows at a time. And they all came together to make this trailer. And even to this day, we get folks who are like, I got in the industry because of that trailer. And not for lack of trying, we haven't done anything Warhammer related for 20 years, right? So Tim was like, hey, come back and run.
Oh, yeah, we did the fantasy. We did the fantasy stuff
40K,
after that. Yeah, 40K.
We hadn't done anything 40K related. And Tim said, come back, run the show with me. And Warhammer was one of the first in the door, and I was like, "Oh man, yes." Why is it the way it is, and how do you tell that? Like, I love the folks at Games Workshop, Andy Smiley over there, and Aaron Dembski-Bowden, who we worked with. It was finding the right story is difficult, but ultimately we settled on, and we look at the episode as sort of a violent tone poem for what Warhammer is. Like trying to pick a race or pick a mission or even wherever it's taking place is almost impossible. So we were like, how do we just sort of encapsulate the tone of what Warhammer is in one 15-minute episode? It's tricky because there's such an intense doctrine to what Warhammer is. And your heroes have to make choices. And so we were like trying to find a way where in this like very strict regime, like there are characters who make choices is difficult. And so that was ultimately we settled on, like if you watch it multiple times, you may come away with the idea that there's this underlying message of, can we control what our children become? And like and weirdly through the lens of Warhammer. But they like Dave always has to have this like touchy-feely core, and like everything he does, it's like saccharine sweet in a good way. But I will say just the depth of the lore. I'm not a Warhammer fanatic, but the depth of the lore is such. Well, I think the great thing that Dave did here, and it's a weird thing, like how to not break the surface tension of this, but
for the fans, they'll feel like it's true, even though they know everything about Warhammer. But for the uninitiated, they can just sit back and let it wash over them. It's not exposition heavy, but you also don't feel lost because you're not, you haven't invested years of your life in the franchise. And it really is. I showed it to someone and I said, listen, you're not going to understand this, and I don't either, but just, it's fucking beautiful. Just let it wash over you and enjoy it. And they did.
There's this the famous 40K saying is, "And they shall know no fear," right? But I'm like, they have.
Oh my God, that was super nerdy. Go ahead.
What it is?
It's the brand. It's the brand.
And it's the title of the episode. Like, and if we're not super nerdy, then I want to meet those people.
We shouldn't be doing the show.
There is some. I mean, another episode I got to see, and I think a lot of the secret of this is like a lot of these stories kind of start in media res, so you always just kind of hit the ground running. I was been playing Unreal since like the Dreamcast, and I remember like talking to my friends like, hey man, check out like the fire effects on this thing. Like Doom could never like do this. Like how was it like finding this almost like Spartacus kind of story within the world of Unreal Tournament for this series?
I think Tim did the last pass on that script, but we worked very closely with Epic on that. They have a sort of story team at Epic that we worked with, and typically in the show, our process is we bring authors in to sort of mimic the style of Blood, Death, and Robots. We struggled to find a story with that, so we sort of got in a room with Epic to figure it out. But we've been playing that game too for years. At Blur, we always used to have a lunchtime Quake game, but for a while, Unreal Tournament sort of usurped that, and we played Unreal for a while.
And Descent, and Duke Nukem. Yeah. A lot of games had their day. And I'll just say, like Dave's experience with Warhammer, and there's a few other games that he will probably bring this up with, but our creative director, Frank Balson, who at Blur, who directed the Unreal Tournament short, for him that game was that game. And a lot of us have that game in our past where it's like, this is the one that I remember. It's synonymous with my good feelings about growing up and being with my friends and hanging out. And for him, Unreal Tournament was that game. A lot of it is like how old you are, like where you hit it. For me, it was Wolfenstein, but it's different for everybody.
But why the Spartacus story is, Zan in the game is a villain, and always sort of, I think it's one of the things we wanted to do about Secret of is tell the stories that you're not familiar with the game, and we don't just want to retread the same ground. So it was like, where does Zan come from? Like, what made him him? And so we knew we wanted to pick an iconic character. We played around with Malcolm for a little bit and a couple of other characters, but ultimately settled on Zan, and we wanted to show an audience like where he came from, what made him him, in a sort of very ex machina way. He sort of learned from us.
And you guys can check it all out starting December 10th on Prime Video. Again, that's Secret Level. And I'm Sam Stone. Here we are, Den of Geek.
Wait, that's it?
I know, man.
Come on.
I would love to. Yeah.
We came all this way for an interview, and that's...
We keep rolling.
We have so many more answers to the questions you don't have.
Fair enough. Gentlemen, thanks for swinging by. Stay tuned for more New York Comic Con 2024 coverage.